Hello and welcome to another Magic the Gathering draft video. It's Al here with you, and this is how to draft MTG. In this video, we're talking about drafting black-green squirrels. This is another Tier 1 archetype in Bloomburrow Limited, currently the second most winning color pair in the format. As always, please click like and subscribe if you'd like to support the channel. It helps a huge amount. And leave a comment, say hello, or let me know what you'd like to see in future videos. I always love to hear from you. Starting with the overall strategy of black-green squirrels, this is a forage deck. Forage means sacrificing a food or exiling 3 cards from your graveyard. Different cards will call that out, and you will get a bonus if you can forage. This deck wants to generate value through cards that produce food tokens, cards that let you self-mill, which means putting cards in your graveyard from your deck, and cards that bring cards back from your graveyard. You want to pressure your opponent with large creatures and disrupt their game plan with removal. Some key uncommons for the deck. One of the best green uncommons is Hunter's Talent. 1 and a green for a class enchantment. When it enters, target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature you don't control. You can level it up for 1 and a green to level 2, and it says whenever you attack, target attacking creature gets +1/+0 and gains trample until end of turn. And for 3 and a green, you can level it to level 3 at the beginning of your end step. If you control a creature with power 4 or greater, draw a card. So all of these modes are super valuable in black-green. The removal aspect of it, only costing 2 mana, makes it super flexible. Your creatures are going to be a little bit bigger on average than some of the other decks. So the first effect of this card is going to kill whatever you want most of the time. And then since you're playing for a longer game, the level 3 ability is actually super relevant and will put you over the top of other decks that don't have access to an ability like this. Vine Reap Mentor is the signpost uncommon for the deck. It's black-green for a 3/2 squirrel. It says when it enters or dies, create a food token. So a ton of value here. This deck really wants food tokens to begin with. This is really nice as a 2-mana 3/2, as once you start attacking with it, your opponent's going to have to decide whether or not they want to take 3 damage a turn or potentially trade one of their creatures for it and give you another food token. Wix Patrol is 4 black for a 5/3 rat. When it enters, you mill 3 cards. You put the top 3 cards of your library, your deck, into your graveyard. When you do, target creature an opponent controls gets -X until end of turn, where X is the greatest mana value among cards in your graveyard. This card is just excellent on its own. Most of the time it's going to kill something no matter what, but in a deck like black-green squirrels, which actually actively wants to mill itself and play bigger creatures, you're likely to have a pretty expensive creature in your graveyard to begin with, at which point this is just a 6-mana 5/3 that kills whatever you want. Downwind Ambusher is 3 and a black for a 4/2 with flash. When it enters, you choose 1. Target creature an opponent controls gets -1/-1 until end of turn, or destroy target creature an opponent controls that was dealt damage this turn. Just a lot of really good value for 4 mana. This can flash in and block a 1/1 while killing a second 1/1, which is a lot of value, or can help a creature of yours win a combat, and you're also left with this nice 4/2 body. Just a really great mid-range card for any black deck. Fell and Feed the Cycle are just really good removal spells in black. Fell being 2 mana to kill a creature, and Feed the Cycle being 3 mana to kill a creature at instant speed, but you can forage to discount the cost by a black mana. Thoughtstalker Warlock, one of the best black uncommons, 2 and a black for a 2/2 lizard with menace. When it enters, choose target opponent. If they lost life this turn, they reveal their hand and you choose a non-land card from it and they discard that card. Otherwise, they just discard a card of their choice. Just a lot of value for 3 mana. If you can get the first effect where you get to choose the card, it's really, really backbreaking. This is great in any black deck and certainly good here. Overprotect is 1 and a green for an instant. Target creature you control gets +3/+3 and gains trample, hexproof, and indestructible until end of turn. In a deck like black-green, that's more of a mid-range deck. It wants to go into the late game. It wants to play bigger creatures. You are interested in protecting those creatures from removal. You also want to be able to block and not feel too bad. You want to be able to block their 3/2 with your 4/4 and not be too worried if they have a combat trick, because you're going to be trying to stabilize sometimes against the aggressive decks. And Overprotect makes sure that your creature is going to win that combat or is not going to die to that removal spell, and that is very important for a deck like this. Galewind Moose is 4 green for a 6/6 with Flash, Vigilance, Reach, and Trample. Exactly the type of big finisher that a deck like this is looking for. In terms of key commons for the deck, Cash Grab is the big one. It's 1 and a green for an instant. It says mill 4 cards. You may put a permanent card from among the cards milled this way into your hand. If you control a squirrel or return a squirrel card to your hand in this way, create a food token. So this just does absolutely everything this deck is looking for. It puts cards in your graveyard for forage. It gives you a food token most of the time for forage. And it gives you nice card selection. So later in the game, when you're looking for a specific creature or you don't want to hit any more lands, this allows you to do that. And early in the game, if you need to find lands, this allows you to do that as well. What's particularly nice is Cash Grab's a little bit underrated right now. It's coming around later in the draft, 6th pick and beyond. So this is a nice reward for being in the black-green archetype. Baker's Bane Duo is 1 and a green for a 2/2 Squirrel Raccoon. When it enters, you create a food token. Nice. And whenever you expend 4, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn. So it gives a food token, which this deck really needs, and stays relevant throughout the game. Black-Green Squirrels also has access to some really good removal in the format. We've got Savor, 1 and a black for an instant. Target creature gets -2/-2 until end of turn, and you get a food token. Longstock Brawl, single green for a sorcery. Your creature fights their creature, and if you gift them a tapped 1/1 blue fish, your creature gets a +1/+1 counter on it. Your creatures are already going to be bigger than theirs in most cases, so you probably won't even have to give the gift, and it's only 1 green mana. Nocturnal Hunger is 2 and a black for an instant. You can gift a food, destroy target creature. If the gift wasn't promised, you lose 2 life. You're not too worried about giving your opponent a food a lot of the time in a deck like this because you're trying to go to the long game. But also, because of the amount of food you have, you're going to have a nice extra life cushion, so you're not going to be too worried about losing that 2 life a lot of the time. A couple of other nice commons in the deck. High Stride, single green for an instant. Target creature gets +1/+3, gains reach until end of turn, and you untap it. Just a nice way to stay alive against the aggressive decks. Surprise block them, and it's nice and cheap, which is really nice in a deck that's looking to spend a ton of mana every turn. Polywallop is 3 and a green for an instant, costs 1 less for each frog you control. It says target creature you control deals damage equal to twice its power to target creature you don't control. You're fairly likely, if you're playing green, to end up with a couple of frogs in your deck. So oftentimes Polywallop's going to cost only 2 and a green for you, which is really nice. It's instant speed. If you get even more frogs, it's even better. It's still quite playable in the black-green Squirrels deck, even though it's obviously at its best in the Frogs deck. Some other solid creatures for the deck. Tree Guard Duo, 3 and a green for a 3/4 Frog Rabbit. When it enters until end of turn, target creature you control gains Vigilance and +X/+X, where X is the number of creatures you control. This is not a go-wide deck, but even a 4-mana 3/4 that gives +3/+3 to something is just really nice. Stats are really good in this format, and any deck is going to appreciate having a copy or 2 of Tree Guard Duo. We also have Daggerfang Duo, 2 and a black for a 3/2 Rat Squirrel with Death Touch. When it enters, you may mill 2 cards, so it's going to help you get to forage. It's a really good blocker. It's going to stand in the way of anything that's trying to attack you, and it's a pretty good attacker too. It'll hit them for 3 every turn if they don't want to put a creature in front of it. Finally, we've got Bark Form Harvester at common. This is an artifact creature for 3 mana. It's 2/3 Shapeshifter Changeling, which means it is every creature type, so it's going to count as a squirrel for you, which is important for enabling Cash Grab. It's also going to count as a frog, which is nice for enabling Polywallop. It's got reach, and it says pay 2 mana, put target card from your graveyard on the bottom of your library. This isn't a card you need to take highly, but if you find yourself with like 3 or 4 copies of Cash Grab, you may get yourself into a situation where you're milling yourself out and you're going to run out of cards in your deck, at which point Bark Form Harvester can start putting cards from your graveyard back on the bottom of your library so you don't run out. If you completely mill yourself out, then you get to stack your deck with Bark Form Harvester and know what you're going to draw every single turn. Just put the best stuff from your graveyard into your deck, and this gives you a lot of finishing power in the late game and inevitability. In terms of rares that you might take early, might pull you into this deck, make you want to draft this deck, we've got Season of Loss. 3 black black. For a sorcery, you get to choose up to 5 paw prints worth of modes. You can choose the same mode more than once. For 1 paw print, each player sacrifices a creature. For 2 paw prints, draw a card for each creature you control that died this turn. For 3 paw prints, each opponent loses X life, where X is the number of creature cards in your graveyard. So a lot of the time, you're going to make each player sacrifice 5 creatures, just clear the board. Occasionally, you might make each player sacrifice 3 creatures and then draw a card for each creature you control that died, so draw 3. And in this deck, you might even get to use that third mode. If you've milled yourself a fair bit, each opponent losing X life, or X is the number of creature cards in your graveyard, might be lethal for them, especially if you tack on each player sacrifices 2 creatures to that. So this is going to have a huge effect on the game no matter which modes you choose, and you're going to get to choose which ones are best for you. Huge card, big reason to draft black and to draft black-green. Fecund Green Shell is 3 green for a 4/6 with reach. If you control 10 or more lands, creatures you control get +2/+2. Whenever it or another creature you control with toughness greater than its power enters, look at the top card of your library. If it's a land card, you may put it onto the battlefield tapped, otherwise put it into your hand. Black-green's going to have a fair amount of creatures with toughness more than power, which will trigger this a bunch. This is a great blocker, really hard to get through this thing, and of course, since you are playing a longer game, you may get to the 10 land threshold and give your creatures +2/+2, at which point the game is likely over for your opponent. Next is Maha, it's Feathers Knight, 3 black for a 6/5 flying trample, has ward, discard a card, and creatures your opponents control have base toughness 1. So this will kill them in a couple of turns if it's not dealt with. In order to kill it, they need to have a removal spell and an extra card in hand, so you're getting a built-in 2-for-1 there. And giving their creatures toughness 1 makes it really difficult for them to attack through you. So not only does this stabilize you, it also puts a huge amount of pressure on your opponent. Igra, Eater of All, is 3 black-green for a 6/6, has ward, sacrifice a food. It says other creatures are food artifacts in addition to their other types and have pay 2 mana, tap, sack this permanent, you gain 3 life. Whenever a food is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, put 2 +1/+1 counters on Igra, Eater of All. So every time you kill a creature of your opponent's, this is getting bigger. Every time you sacrifice a regular food token, if you're foraging or you just want to gain some life, this is getting bigger. Anytime one of your creatures dies, this is getting bigger. If they want to target it, they have to sacrifice a food, it's getting bigger. It's always getting bigger. It's only 5 mana. This is an awesome card. Innkeeper's Talent is 1 and a green for a class enchantment. It says at the beginning of combat on your turn, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. You can pay a green mana to make it level 2. It says permanents you control with counters on them have ward 1. And you can pay 3 and a green to make it level 3. If you would put 1 or more counters on a permanent or player, put twice that many of each kind on that permanent or player instead. So you're getting 2 +1/+1 counters each turn. So this comes down as early as turn 2, and because this deck wants to play a longer game, you're going to get lots of turns of getting extra +1/+1 counters, and this will just help take over the game pretty much all by itself. Season of Gathering is 4 green for a sorcery. Choose up to 5 paw prints worth of modes. For 1 paw, you can put a +1/+1 counter on a creature you control, and it gains Vigilance and Trample until end of turn. For 2 paws, you can destroy all artifacts or destroy all enchantments. And for 3 paws, draw cards equal to the greatest power among creatures you control. All of these modes are super useful, no matter which ones you need. No matter what the game state is, this is going to have a huge effect on it. It can either just kill your opponent out of nowhere by putting 5 +1/+1 counters and giving trample to your team, or it can pull you way ahead on cards, or if they have a banishing light on top of one of your creatures, you can get rid of that, get your creature back. This just kind of does it all. Tender Wild Guide is 1 and a green for a 2/2 with Offspring 2. It taps to add a mana of any color, or it taps to put a +1/+1 counter on itself. So this is exactly the kind of card a deck like this wants. You can play it early on turn 2 and start ramping out your bigger creatures, or you can play it on turn 4 with Offspring, ramp out stuff, or if the game goes long, these will just get bigger and bigger and threaten to take over the game. Camellia the Seed Miser is the signpost rare for the deck. It's 1 black-green for a 3/3 legendary squirrel with menace. Other squirrels you control have menace. Whenever you sacrifice 1 or more foods, you create a 1/1 green squirrel creature token. And you can pay 2 mana and forage to put a +1/+1 counter on each other squirrel you control. So this kind of just does exactly what the deck wants to do. It's worth noting that if you activate the forage ability, you'll get the green squirrel token from the third ability on this card before the +1/+1 counter ability resolves. So this card is just absolutely perfect for this deck. Lumra, Bellow of the Woods is 4 green for a legendary creature with vigilance and reach. Its power and toughness are equal to the number of lands you control, and when it enters, you mill 4 cards, then return all land cards from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped, even ones that you previously milled as well. So this is going to be absolutely huge and works with the self-mill theme of the deck. Love to play it in black-green Squirrels. Finally, we've got Osteomancer Adept. This is 1 in a black for a 2/2 squirrel with Death Touch. You can tap it, and it says till end of turn you may cast creature spells from your graveyard by foraging, in addition to paying their other costs. If you cast a spell in this way, it enters with a finality counter on it, which means if it would die, it's exiled instead. So this is excellent in the early game. It's just a 2-mana 2/2 Death Touch with the Squirrel type. And of course, in the late game, it's going to give you a bunch of extra card advantage over your opponent. So black-green Squirrels, one of the best decks in the format. Its pros are it has some of the best removal in the format, especially at common. And Cash Grab as a premium common goes 6th pick on average right now, according to the 17 lands data. So if you're in black-green, you can reasonably expect to see a few of these in the draft, which is great because they're exactly what you're looking for to drive your deck's plan. In terms of cons, the deck does rely on removal as a way to stay on par with the aggressive decks, and you do need a way to go over the top of your opponent, as stalling out the game isn't enough because your opponent will eventually draw a bomb or have a way to beat you. So make sure you have something that goes over the top. Could be a big bomb rare of your own, or even something like a Hunter's Talent that's going to generate some card advantage for you. Just something to keep in mind when you're drafting this deck. And that'll do it for this one. Thank you so much for watching. Please click like and subscribe to support the channel. Leave a comment just to say hi, or let me know what you want to see in the future. You can always reach me at howtodraftmtg@gmail.com. If you're interested in private coaching or you have other questions, please email me there. Until next time, bye for now.